Well, welcome to episode 6 of the DevDecoder podcast.
The best episode.
I knew you'd be excited about this. This is your favourite Jabba the Hutt episode, isn't it?
Yes.
Well,
best episode.
seeing as I'm clearly an Ewok, that must leave you as Jabba.
I'm okay with that.
Is it more Pizza the Hutt?
Pizza.
Anyway, my name's Craig Dean. I'm the Chief Executive of Web Applications UK and the sensible speaker in the DevDecoder podcast.
I disagree.
And with me, I have Rambo.
Oh my god. I don't even know who that is.
You don't know? Oh my word, you don't know who Rambo is?
I've heard of him.
Of all the levels of ignorance that you display, that is probably the greatest. I guess we should explain why I'm calling you Rambo.
That'd make sense, wouldn't it?
Yeah, so it's as I think we said in our first podcast, for those that weren't brave enough to go from episode 1 and work their way up to episode 6, which to be fair is also the way you should watch Star Wars. But yeah, in episode 1 I explained that I can never quite remember what your actual name is. I know it begins with R.
And then we decided that was actual BS.
And it's mostly about trying to wind you up.
Which doesn't work.
So there isn't actually a good reason why I call you something other than whatever your name actually is.
What is my name?
Rachel?
What is my name?
Raquel?
What is my name?
Rhonda? You're listening to DevDecoder podcast. You can subscribe and like us on all the major podcasting platforms and YouTube.
And don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram at DevDecoder.
You can email us using podcast@devdecoder.com.
Or check out our website at devdecoder.com.
We love hearing from all our listeners, so make sure you get in touch and let us know what you'd like to hear about. I'm kind of mad this week.
Oh, you're always mad.
No, I don't mean mad as in insane, I mean as in a little bit angry, a bit upset.
Yeah, you always are.
So, as you know, we talked about a few weeks ago how annoyed I was about the attacks on the net neutrality in the US that had been going through and the votes going on there. Well, this week is the European Union's turn at attacking the internet.
Go on.
So they passed, a small cabal of 15 European legal experts passed two articles, Article 11 and Article 13. Most of it's pretty agreeable, actually, but two articles have drawn heavy criticism from some of the founding fathers of the internet. And quite a lot of the over 100 tech entrepreneurs and luminaries of the internet have signed articles condemning these two articles. So Article 13 effectively puts more onus on websites to control the content that's on them and to put more effort into making sure that any content that is copyrighted never appears on their website in the first place.
Okay. That makes sense.
Well, not really, because a lot of the website is built on the ability for user-generated content. So a lot of the web is built on the idea that people can go and upload things. Okay, It costs large companies like YouTube and stuff millions to enforce copyright and to have strikeout notices. But smaller companies, how do you go and monitor that level of content, etc.? Up till now, you're largely protected on the internet that if you're taking reasonable efforts to remove content that's been reported to you as copyrighted, but now it puts the onus far more on the websites. And it's very vague as usual with a lot of this legislation. And effectively it says we need to use software to identify automatically copyright, but it doesn't say what software and how to use it. And it's that kind of usual idea that people that are not familiar with the way internet works and the way technology works say, oh, we'll just use some software to do that. Well, what software? And how do you write that software? And where is that software? And who's paying for it? And how does it... And it's really a poorly thought out piece of legislation.
Wouldn't it help people that put copyrighted images onto their website or whatever and not knowing that it's copyrighted? Would it not help them?
Well, this is the problem.
Rather
it's
than
actually
them getting sued for it.
It's holding them accountable. It's saying that if you put an image up on your website, but you didn't realise it was copyright protected because you didn't identify it's copyright protected, you are now going to be liable for that. Whereas before, what would happen is, as long as you took it down and you were told it was copyright, you took it down, it was okay. Now you're not supposed to put it up there ever. So it's never supposed to appear. And that's the first problem with Article 13, but it's just very badly worded and vague. But that's the one a lot of people talked about. The one I'm really concerned on is Article 11. Article 11 is often called the link tax, and the idea here is that if you link to another website, you should pay that website for the privilege of linking to them. Now that's just absolutely abhorrent in the way the internet works.
But you're helping out that website as well. Yeah,
and the idea now is that if I link to a news article on BBC, I need to pay a tax for having that link there.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah, so I need to pay them for it, and it's just really bad legislation. But the problem is that there's a lot of lawmakers grasping with internet and technology and digital that clearly just don't have a clue how half this stuff works. And what we really need is to have politicians that have been educated in the way the internet works and the way that digital works. Otherwise, they're going to make really bad decisions that can have a lot of unintended side effects. And this can really have a huge stifling impact on the way the internet has grown and developed and the freedom that it brings. And it can easily be used and exploited in a way to stamp on freedom of expression and freedom of information.
So this Article 11, so is this mainly for people, say, that are referring to, say, a news article for maybe copyright reasons? Or is this, say, on our blog, I tend to link to other websites to help the readers find out where I got that information from?
Yeah, if you actually link to stuff, it's all very vague and unclear again. But the general idea is that if you link to something else, you'd have to pay for that.
That's ridiculous, though.
Yeah, exactly.
That doesn't make any sense.
No. But these two have been passed just this week.
Okay, so today I'm here with Ned. Say hi, Ned.
Hello, everybody.
So Ned you've just rejoined us, haven't you, this year?
I have, yes.
Do you want to tell people about what's just been happening?
So I spent a very long final year at university, finished my third year, then a very short 2 weeks holiday, and right back into the workforce, being a productive member of society.
What's it like to be back?
It's good. It's great to see everyone, and it's very nice to have something to do in the day other than, slobbing around being a student mostly.
How did you find your final year?
It was quite different to my first 2 years because I knew what I was going to do afterwards, afterward university. So I had less to worry about, and that really helped me focus on my studies, I found. So, I was still leaving coursework to the last minute, like everyone, but I was leaving it to the last minute with a plan.
So you came out of university and came straight here again, didn't you?
Straight here, yeah. Didn't look back.
So how did you find your actual industrial placement experience?
I think that was my most valuable year of university, if you could call it that. I learned a lot of things that I wouldn't have learned at university, sort of industry skills. That's a bit of a buzzword, isn't it? In my industrial placement year, I learned a lot more valuable life skills like time management, dealing with customers, dealing with other employees. Not that I have any problems with that at all.
Not me.
Especially not Rebecca.
So what was it about coding especially that you really enjoy?
What do I enjoy about coding? When you finally solve the problem.
Problem solving.
Yeah, when there's that click moment and you know how to go forward and it feels good.
When did you know that this is what you wanted to do as a career?
I knew when I was halfway through my industrial placement year, I think. So yeah, I kind of went to university without much of a plan, but working as a real software engineer, it sort of just confirmed with me that not only I could manage to do the job, but I enjoyed it as well. So
you say that industrial placement years are pretty valuable then?
Yes, absolutely. I'd recommend anyone listening to the podcast, if you have the chance, take it with two hands and really go for it. And get stuck in while you're there, because no one likes an employee who's not willing to get stuck in, right?
So you didn't just come to us for the industrial placement. You've been with us before, haven't you?
Yes, I had. During college, I saw some very large posters on the side of the science centre just from the college down the road, Oldham Sixth Form College. Shout out. shout out to the computing department. You did as well. Yeah. So I saw some big posters there, and I'll be honest, my mum was bugging me to do something over the summer other than sit around. I made contact with the company, and I spent 2 weeks here writing solitaire, I think it was.
Have you done any coding before that work experience placement?
Yeah, I did. So I started in secondary school. I don't really remember why, but I remember how I started. I got my dad to buy me a book on object-oriented programming.
Oh my god.
So I was sort of reading that and, playing around with Java on the computer. During college, I did computing at college, which was a lot of coding as well.
What advice would you give to people that are either looking to get into the tech industry or looking to do an industrial placement?
Well, if you have no prior experience with writing code before, I would suggest try a bit in your spare time first. See if you like it. There's loads of resources online. It's a hot topic these days. How do I get into coding? So many people have answered it, but I would definitely suggest trying it out first and try to find a project that sort of has a meaning to you. So, for example, my first projects were sort of to help me out with my gaming, which I used to enjoy. I still do, but slightly less now. So I would write sort of software that would help me out playing games, and so because writing the software, I knew that the software would be helpful in the end. It had more of a meaning to it, so I could be more passionate about it.
Great, thanks, Ned. So this summer, the ICT exam disappears.
Yay!
It's gone.
Yes.
Why are you cheering?
Because I don't think it added the kind of value it needed to. I think it's a wasted GCSE for a lot of young people.
But now there's going to be a big fall in achieving some form of computing qualification.
Well, it's what value does those computing qualifications actually give? I mean, the reality was that the original ICT qualifications were effectively just, can you use Microsoft Word and can you use an email client and do you know what a spreadsheet is? And most of the teaching was of incredibly poor quality. They tried to then revolutionise it and modernise it by bringing in coding, but the people teaching those didn't have any ability how to teach coding, and so it didn't make it any better. And ultimately what you had was what was considered by many just as a soft GCSE. It didn't have really any value to employers because not enough people did it. So if you're somebody employing somebody based on an ability to develop software, be a programmer or anything like that, them having an ICT GCSE made no difference in terms of whether you'd recruit them or not.
Well, you can say that for a lot of subjects, though.
Yeah, but I think the idea is that IT should really be cross-curricular. It should be something that invades the curriculum. And actually, most young people are using IT throughout their lives anyway and throughout their education. And we need to make sure that we're not really just teaching. I think one of my issues is IT is a very, very fast-moving industry. And if you're teaching a 16-year-old how to use today's technology, well, today's technology is not going to be in common usage when they enter the workforce. So put it in perspective, right? A 16-year-old is probably 5 years away from being, really entering their career, especially if they go through a university pathway. Okay. Well, if you go back 5 years ago, even in our timeline, just 5 years from before now, the world was a very different place. It moves incredibly quickly. The kind of technologies we use, the kind of information we do, it's just very quick. So what we don't need is developing knowledge. We need skills in our young people. And ITC wasn't really delivering those skills. It was
ICT.
ICT. ICT wasn't delivering skills. It was delivering knowledge. And that knowledge was out of date way too quickly.
Well, yeah, but last year, just over half of the schools offered computer science at GCSE level.
Yeah.
So getting rid of ICT, you're getting rid of all those computing skills that they learn. And granted, it might not be much, but computer science is going to be harder to get into if you don't have some knowledge of...
Well, almost, if you look at the kind of people going on to computer science courses at university, for example, there was no entry requirement to have done computer science at A-level or to have done ICT at A-level. And honestly, it didn't help them get onto those courses. So what really allows people to get into those kind of courses is having a passion for the subject and going out there and doing something about it. I'm all for having a computer science course if it's taught properly and it delivers good quality education. And so far, that's not what was happening. So I'm not sad to see it go, personally.
Well, this is why we do a lot of mentoring, don't we, with young people?
Yeah.
So we've got our own core club, and then we introduced coding to a primary school, I think it was a couple of weeks ago. So they didn't have a core club, and now they've started one up, and we're got really good feedback, actually, and they're all excited to do it. So maybe it's not about the ICT subject, but what interest people are going to have in computer science.
Yeah, I think the issue is that ICT as it wasn't fit for purpose. I have no issue in us putting computer science on the curriculum if it was taught as well as maths is taught, as if it was taught as well as English is taught. And actually, I say that, and of course we're struggling to get good maths teachers and English teachers and science teachers as it is. But if those were taught well, and if ICT was taught at the same level of rigour as those, which was about skills and not just about knowledge catcher, that would be a really valuable exercise. The problem is it wasn't. Too often ICT teachers weren't specialised in that field. It was just thrown on them and expected to teach something they didn't fully understand themselves. And it just wasn't a good quality GCSE. So I'm actually quite glad to see those qualifications go, and hopefully in future we'll get something that's better, but far better not to have it than to have it badly done.
Well, we've got to also make sure that females are also finding computer science interesting and they want to do it, because I think 20% of a GCSE entrants for the computer science were female.
Exactly. So we're already putting young girls off the career and the choice even before they get to it. And to be honest, we were putting off a lot of young people from entering the industry because they did the course and they didn't like it, and it wasn't for them because it was badly taught. The reality is that if you look at outcomes for young people and where they end up going and what they end up doing, they frequently end up going and getting engaged in something that in the courses that they were well taught at school. So the classes that were well taught and were engaging and interesting tend to be the things that they ended up taking with them into later life as being the stuff they enjoyed. And what we can't be doing is teaching a course so badly, which sadly was the case in most places. Not all. There were some wonderful pockets of good quality, but they were few and far between compared to the amount of rubbish that was out there. Saying if you're not going to do it, don't do it. If you're not going to do it well, don't do it at all. Let's let the industry come in and let's try and do something more appropriate and get young people engaged in things like hackathon and coder dojos and code clubs and code katanas, all the kind of things we're doing with young people to get them excited about the industry, that they really genuinely, the Hack Manchester Junior that we do, for example, the kids love it. They come along, they have a great time, and they get passionate about it. Many of them do go on to get into the industry and have a great career in it. And I think that's what we need to do. We need to be engaging people, and young people in particular, in a way that actually gets them excited and passionate about the topic.
Well, this is why we're sponsoring an event at the weekend, aren't we? So we're going to Manchester Girl Geeks Bar Camp, which is sort of like a conference for females that are interested in the tech industry. So we're going along to that, aren't we? Well, yep. I am.
I wasn't invited. Actually, you and I have been to a few events relating to diversity and stuff, and I was at an event recently about equalities and diversity, and they were talking about the language we use in adverts, and that's been in the news again this week as well. And they've found and done research that certain phrases and terminology puts women off. And certain,
really?
Yeah, and actually there's been great research on this. Atlassian said that they saw an 80% uptick in the number of females applying for roles just by changing the language that was used. In every career, it's really about the skills that you have. It's not about the knowledge you get. I mean, for example, if you're a herb farmer, it's important that you've got time management.
Oh my God.
She's literally walked out. On Saturday, another member of our marketing team, Emily, visited Manchester Girl Geeks for a bar camp. It was a great opportunity for her to catch up with some of the girls there and talk about getting into our industry.
Hi, so would you mind introducing yourself, please?
So my name is Jem Hill. I am a software tester for the BBC, and I am co-chair of Manchester Girl Geeks.
Brilliant. So how did you get involved with Manchester Girl Geeks?
So I'm originally from the West Midlands, so I moved up to Manchester, and I didn't know anyone. And so I was kind of, me and my partner, who also didn't know anyone, we were just Googling around, and one of us stumbled onto this. I was like, I'll go along. And then I started just showing up a little bit early to put out chairs and help them clean up and set up. Then I became a volunteer. Now I'm co-chair.
So a real journey through the Manchester Girl Geeks then.
Yes.
With Manchester Girl Geeks, what is kind of its overarching ethos or mission?
We want to provide, I'm making this up on the fly, I'm not going to lie, because our main ethos is putting on fun events and having tea and cake.
I mean, what?
I mean, that's it, really.
What do you want?
We'd actually love to not be needed. We'd love to go, okay, science and tech and engineering and maths has got to a point where women don't feel the need to come to a space where there's majority women. They don't feel the need for that safe space. That is the ideal, where we're putting these on because we want to. But after the majority of events, someone will come up and go, I really needed this. I needed to come to a space where it's the majority of people aren't men. Thank you for putting this on. And I remember our very first bar camp, there was only about 50 people, it was quite a small one. And one man turned up and he came to us afterwards and went, is this what it's like for you all the time at events? Because it's the first time you've been at a tech event. Yeah, being the minority. And so it's giving those experiences as well, where it is a majority of people who aren't men, and this is what it is. And so, overall arching is to make sure women in Manchester and girls, because we've got some girls who come to other ones who are going to tech, so it's that support system, seeing people, not famous people, just people in Manchester doing the jobs that they want to do and talking about them in smart ways, and then tea and cake.
I mean, brilliant. So what other events have you got planned for the upcoming year?
So we're going to be at the Blue Dot Festival in July, which is at Jodrell Bank. It's like there's gigs and there's science talks and all that kind of stuff. We do a few show and tells, which are almost like mini bar camps. So instead of a whole day, we do an afternoon where we go, there's going to be tea, there's going to be cake, come and talk about something up to us. And people do like 5-10 minute talks. We usually do something with the Science Festival at the Museum of Science and Industry in October. So we did this last year and we're going to do it again in August this year. The game Pokemon Go, where you walk around and catch Pokemon. Yeah. We did that around the northern quarter in Manchester while picking up litter.
Oh wow.
And there was a prize for the most litter picked and a prize for the most Pokemon course. And that was genuine. And then we went for tea and cake afterwards.
Always going to be there.
And that was genuinely so funny. It was a really good turnout. And we're probably going to do that again in August, just because we get to pick litter.
Yeah,
and have fun.
Getting outside.
Exactly. It's we just do, basically we sit down and go, what do we want to do that sounds fun? Let's see if we can pull that off.
Well, that's great. And you're also a podcaster yourself. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So I have 2 podcasts. I have one about software testing, which is called Let's Talk About Tests, Baby, which is about which is about 100 episodes in now. And then I have one called Inner Pod, which is where people come and talk and share their mental health struggles or issues or stories, just to give people a space to talk about that kind of stuff.
And to follow you on social media, what are your handles?
So I am Gem_Hill on basically pretty much everything. Twitter is where I'm most active. I tweet all the time. And I'm also on Instagram fairly as well. Those are the best ways of contacting me. And there's links there to like email addresses and stuff for the podcast, so you can just get me there if you want to chat more offline as well.
Manchester Girl Geeks is at MCR
Girl Geeks, and manchestergirlgeeks.com.
Great.
And events every month. Most of them, pretty much all of them are free to come to, unless we've got a thing that you're going to make and take away, then we cover our expenses. But pretty much all our events are free and on a Sunday afternoon. So what else are you doing on a Sunday afternoon? Come chat with us and we'll provide tea and cake.
Great. Well, thank you very much for speaking with us and for your time. And let's hope the rest of the day is as good as this morning.
Thank you so much for having me.
Speaking of being geeky, there's one thing that has me quite excited this week, a bit of a milestone.
Oh, what could it be?
Well, RyuJIT is now completely the JIT encoder for .NET. They've completely removed the old JIT 32 code base.
I have no idea what this means.
I didn't think we would. But I thought it might be an interesting point to point out the way a lot of people write software and what software actually is. Because have you ever really given much thought to software and what software is?
No, I can't say I've given much thought to it.
But you have actually written some programming before, haven't you? You've done some coding, you've tried it. And what you probably noticed is that coding is kind of human readable, isn't it? It's got English words in it like if and else and
I don't understand how it all works though.
Yeah, but it's kind of human readable, and a lot of coding that we do is using words and language, and it allows us to express ideas effectively. Ultimately, coding is where you take what we call an algorithm, and an algorithm is a solution. It's a way of solving a problem, and then we write that down in a way that a computer can implement that solution. Okay, that's ultimately what coding is. Imagine you're a Chinese speaker and you've got this great book in Chinese. Okay. Now, Chinese is quite a difficult language for us to understand. Mm-hmm. It's actually probably one of the hardest languages to learn for an English speaker. Okay. What we need to do is translate that book, don't we? So we translate that book from Chinese to English. That's quite a big job. But once it's done, we can read that book in English anytime we want. Right? Now, a compiler is that. So a compiler takes a program which is written in a human language, which is hard for a computer to understand, and translates it into assembly language, which is a very simple set of instructions for a computer to follow. And that's what a compiler does. Right? The beauty then is that once you've done that compilation, you can run that program over and over again. So most of the code you run on your PC has been compiled, and it can be run over and over again. And on your phone, it's compiled code, and it can be run over and over again because it's written in a language that phone knows. The problem is, of course, just like in the world, different PCs and phones and stuff, they have different languages. Their assembly language, as we call it, and their instruction set is different. There might be an ARM processor or an Intel processor or an AMD processor, and there might be 32 bits, or there might be 64 bits. There's lots of different processor languages, and they're all quite different, right? But they also have very similar things. So the other way you can do things, of course, is if we're in the UN, for example, and there's a Chinese speaker at the UN, and you're at the UN, what you have is an interpreter talking into your ear. And as that Chinese person is speaking, they're telling you what it is in English. So you immediately, with just a little delay after, getting the translation in your ear. The problem is that if they repeat themselves, you have to repeat that translation, don't you? You're constantly doing it. And actually, just like in the UN, in computer terms, we call that interpreting, right? And that's used on the World Wide Web. So one of the most prominent languages in the World Wide Web is JavaScript. Actually, on the server, it's also PHP, and both of these are what we call interpreted languages, in that the code is stored in human form and it's interpreted whenever you want to run it. But every time you run it, and I'm simplifying a bit, but every time you run it, you have to interpret it again. Whereas before, the compiled code, you could run it once, you compile it once and run it as many times as you want. The interpreted code, you have to you take the code and you have to interpret it to run it, and so you're interpreting it all the time. Now, the reason we have this difference is because interpreters are great because you can take that code and I can send it to any different platform like a phone or anything else, and they can have their own interpreter that allows them to interpret at any time. I don't have to send a different version around. So the RyuJIT is the bit that takes it from Latin to French. It's the bit that does the very quickly interprets the IL into code it can run straight away. And it's so quick that it can translate it pretty much as quickly as it reads it. Whereas if it tried to translate the code right from its initial human readable form, it takes quite a while to do that, right? So what .NET, and .NET is an IL, has an IL language, and C# is one of the languages that we translate in .NET. There's quite a few others like F# and stuff, but they all translate into IL, this intermediate language, and that IL can be shipped to all these different platforms, and then we use the JIT, the RyuJIT now, to translate the IL on each different platform. And this week they finally have said that all of the old legacy versions, and now what they've said is we've got the same translator, the same interpreter can now translate all of these different languages, not just the one we want. And that's actually quite big news because it means that going forward it's quicker for us to add new features into languages and to move things forward. But this is how software development works. We effectively write code in one language, it gets translated to another language, and eventually it gets translated into a form that a computer can use it. And actually writing those compilers and interpreters is a really fun part of being a software developer. It's something that I've done in the past as well, and we write these things to actually go and translate from one language to another. What Manchester Girl Geeks are doing is just really impressive, and I hope that came across with that interview from Emily. Certainly, I think that our industry is such a transformational part of society that it just absolutely must be representative of our entire community and not just parts of it. Don't you agree, Rebecca?
I wholeheartedly agree.
So our more eagle-eared listeners might recognise that you've suddenly developed a rather masculine Scottish brogue. What's going on?
Puberty's a wonderful thing.
So it's actually another one of our marketing team. Ian, where on earth is Rebecca?
Rebecca's having a few days off after being at Manchester Girl Geeks.
Well, hopefully she'll be back here next week, although I have to say it's quite a nice pleasure to have you here instead, Ian.
Oh, thank you. It's a breath of fresh air.
Certainly the level of conversation seems to have lifted slightly.
She's not going to be happy with that.
Well, I'll have to go in then. Okay, so goodbye to our listeners. Let's see you again next week for episode 7.